Hi, everyone. My name is Ben Opapari, and this is the Songwriters on Process podcast. Since 2010, I've been interviewing songwriters about their writing process. And on this podcast, we go deep, deep, deep into the writing process, far deeper than the usual. Do you start with the lyrics or the music question? By way of background, I have a PhD in English literature, and I'm a prose writer myself. I'm not a songwriter. In fact, I've never written a song in my life. But my goal has always been to treat songwriters the same way that we treat prose writers and poets, just as writers, plain and simple, and have always been interested in the writing process. This is an intelligent conversation between two writers. And on this podcast, like I said, we go deep into the process. We talk about rituals, the seeds of inspiration, the role of movement on the process, writer's block, the revision process, pens, pencils, types of paper, and of course, we talk about books. You can find all the archived interviews on the Songwriters on Podcast website and across all streaming platforms. And with that, let's dive into this week's episode. And today on the pod, we have Hello Mary. Hello Mary's latest album, Amita Ox, is out now on French Kiss Records. It is great. Oh, wow, I love this. The energy, the noise in a good way. The guitar, I just love that sound. So check that album out after you listen to the pod. Of course, Amita Ox is the name of it, out on French Kiss Records. But first, a little bit about the band. 3 women, Stella Wave on drums, Helena Straight on guitar, Michaela Oppenheimer on bass. Wave is the elder statesperson at 24 years of age. The others are both 20. Although they have been around, this is their second album for a couple of years. They all 3 write on acoustic guitar. So we talk about their collective process and also their individual processes. And props to them for bringing up Jennifer Egan, one of my favorite authors, and her book. Well, we talked about both books, but Candy House is Jennifer Egan's latest book. So if you're looking for a good book, check anything out by Jennifer Egan. And also listen to Hello Mary on the pod. Check it out. Stella, we'll start with you. Are you a create everyday type of person, or just when the mood strikes? I find that songwriters tend to be kind of like, yeah, don't push it, because if you push it, things are derivative. Others say no matter how bad it is, you got to do something, no matter what it is. So I'd love to know your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I feel like for me, it's kind of like when it strikes, but I've also gone through long periods of time. I'm actually in one right now where I like don't have the inspiration, or I'm not being struck by some sort of creative higher power or whatever. And when that's the case, I've tried to make it more of a routine. Like, okay, I'm gonna carve out time. I'm gonna sit down with a guitar, try to just see what happens. And I've had some really great songs come out of, making it a little more structured. So I don't think there's really like a secret formula for me, but yeah, like I tend to veer towards wanting it to, come naturally, but it's not always the case.
So that's interesting, because I find, and I'm not a songwriter, I'm a prose writer, but I find that songwriters tell me that when they do kind of sit down, if it's not coming with a deliberate thought of making it happen, that's when the anxiety kind of it makes it almost harder to write, because you're thinking too much about writing, if that makes sense. All right, Helena, how about you? Where do you fall into that?
I've actually been really stressed lately because I'm like beating myself up for not writing as much because we've been touring, and touring is not a good environment for writing because I know both of us usually write on acoustic guitar. So, and we don't really have like the means to just bring an acoustic guitar on tour. And even if we did, I feel like we wouldn't really have the time to actually play it and write. So I've been really like bummed about that, but we just had like a few weeks off and I was writing a little more and it felt really good. But yeah, I definitely don't like try to write every day. I don't even like necessarily play guitar every day. I definitely sing every day, but not in like a serious way.
I do find though that the songwriters obviously who tour tell me that they use that touring. The phrase I always hear is, to fill the well. That the touring is a time when they don't write.
Yeah, and we're kind of new to touring, especially this much. So it's like, I didn't really realize that would happen. But I'm like, I feel like we need to be writing the next album, even though this one's not even out. But that's not true. That's just me being weird. I read this book, How to Write One Song by Jeff Tweedy. Have you read that?
I've read parts of it, but it's often referenced by songwriters. Yeah.
Yeah, and he's like, I read it probably like 2 years ago, and he was like, he had that sort of mentality where it's like you need to write every single day, even if it's shitty. Like every day, you gotta do it for like
He's like
an hour.
such a good songwriter.
He is. So I was like, okay, that's gotta work.
Yeah.
I'm gonna try it, but that's just not really. Maybe it is the vibe, but I don't really have I don't know.
Well, yeah. Michaela, before I get to you, my follow-up is for what it's worth, I actually just interviewed Soccer Mommy earlier a couple hours ago, and we were talking about this, and I think a lot of songwriters tell me that when things aren't happening on one instrument, they'll go to another, whether it's a different actual guitar or a different instrument altogether if they play something else, and that kind of like changing it up, that routine can kind of trigger something in the brain. All right, Michaela, are you a write everyday person or when the mood strikes?
I think this is hard for me. I think when I write like little songs, it's not when like creativity strikes, and it's more like when I'm like, I'm gonna write a little song. But it's not every day either. And a lot of them I really don't like. So I think I would take more of a Jeff Tweedy vibe to it.
So you say you write the songs, but then you don't like them.
I feel like I write more songs that I don't like that I do like. And it's not only when creativity strikes, although sometimes it is, but it's also sometimes I'm just like, I'm going to sit down and like make a little song.
So with those songs that you don't like, do you keep them maybe hoping that down the road you'll feel better about them?
Yes, I have like a huge folder of songs I don't like, and sometimes I listen to them and I'm like, wow, this is so bad, but sometimes I'm like, okay, like I can use this part of this.
Yeah, so does that happen a lot? Because I hear that too, like the kind of mixing and matching, taking lyrics from something or a melody from something, matching it with something else.
I definitely try to do that. I feel like we've done that in a lot of our songs. Wouldn't you guys say? Like a lot of them are like, were originally two different songs or something like that.
So are those collectively, and any of you can answer this, I guess, but are those collectively, are they all in one, practically, are they all in one place? When you say you're mixing and matching, are they all like is there like a collective Hello Mary file, or is it, hey, I've got something, maybe Stella says something, I've got something, does it match with something that Helena has or something like that?
Yeah, I would say the latter.
Oh, really? Okay.
Definitely the case. Like oftentimes that is what happens when I bring a song. Like I'll write part of a song, like a verse or something, and then I bring it to the band, and then usually like Helena being the guitarist too will just kind of like improvise off of the thing that I'll be like, here's this guitar part, and then she'll play it, and then she'll like find something else that kind of fits within the same vein, and then once I feel like we're kind of like a music first band, so like once that happens, then what happens with the vocals and more of the melodies can be figured out later to make it seem more cohesive.
Stella, I'm going to start with you on this because this is the one thing that fascinates me about, I guess with any kind of creativity, is that the writer Agatha Christie once said the best time to plan a book is when you're doing the dishes. So in other words, often we get our best ideas when our brains are engaged in monotonous activities. Those ideas don't come to us when we're thinking about ideas coming to us. Those ideas come to us when we're in the shower, when we're walking, when we're I mean, the things I've heard last week, I heard Swiffering, vacuuming, folding clothes, that when your brains are engaged in an activity that requires no conscious thought, that's when the creativity bubbles up. So Stella, we'll start with you. I'd love to hear your take on that, whether that happens with you, if ideas come to you at those times when your brains are engaged in something that requires no thought whatsoever.
I feel like that happens to me mostly when I'm like adding something to a pre-existing song. So, for example, if Hello Mary is working on a song and we've established like, you know, the guitars and the melodies and whatever, and I'm kind of honing in on like the drum part for something, that will often come to me at really random times. I remember I like woke up one day and had I don't know if it was like a fully fleshed out dream or if it was just like a thought that I was having kind of in my sleep about the drum part for one song that we have, and it changed the whole song. It was for Sink In, actually. Um but I remember like kind of being stuck on one section of the song, like what should happen with the drums, and then realizing after I'd woken up, like, oh, I want to try this out. And then I tried it like the next day or a couple days later in practice, and it sounded way better than what I'd been doing before. So I feel like that's my best example. Or like not even with drums, but with other like lead kind of parts or melodies or harmonies or things like that. Or production ideas. Like those are the kinds of things that kind of come out of nowhere for me personally. But when it comes to writing a song from scratch, like getting the meat and potatoes, that is harder for me to just like come out of nowhere.
Yeah. Well, also I've heard drummers tell me they've gotten ideas uh when they're driving and they're going over like covered bridges, and the thump of the tires going over something. I've heard car alarms also. I mean, we're talking external sounds here, but I've heard car alarms, turn signals are great places. And I know that's a little different what we're talking about, but those
No,
external
but
sounds.
that's totally like in line. Turn signals, that's so funny because every time I'm in a car and there's a turn signal happening for a long time, I'm thinking of it as like a metronome. So maybe I'm not like doing anything out loud or writing anything, but just in my head, like there's always like a drum beat happening over the turn signal. And in a van, when you're touring for multiple hours a day, there's a lot of time for that to happen. So
Well, I could imagine also, right? You're in a van and you're on a highway and the road sucks, and it's like that you're going over a rutted road. I could see that leading to something too.
yeah, that's really cool that you've talked to other drummers and they've said that.
A new one I heard, I had Magdalena Bay on, and this is last week, and Micah told me or they both told me that the sound that electric cars make, that kind of like droning, that humming sound that electric cars make when they first, it's not that gas power, it's a very musical sound, and they
Yeah,
found that to be incredibly inspiring. I thought that was really cool.
that's so cool.
Do song ideas ever come to you when you are because let me give you a quote. David Burns said that a car is a great place to get song ideas. Now, he was driving. He said driving occupies one part of the brain, freeing the creative part up for the song ideas. We'll go back to Stella. Or the role of motion in general. I find that there's kind of two categories. You've got like the self locomotion, which is walking, biking, hiking, anything like that. And then there's kind of the driving, whether you're, passenger or actually someone driving. Do you find that the role of motion has an impact on your process?
Especially in New York, when I'm walking places, I'm usually like trying to tune everything else out because it's so annoying and loud. So I'm usually listening to music, which does kind of stunt things, but kind of similar to what I was saying before about like adding on to songs. Sorry, Michaela's walking through the front door right now. She's transitioning into our space. But what I was saying before about how I'll get ideas like additions to pre-existing songs. I feel like that's true when I'm listening to other music in my headphones. If it's like a Hello Mary song or something else, I will like create harmonies a lot of the time. That's like the main thing when I'm like walking around. I'll be listening to like an Elliott Smith song or something, and I'll just like make an entire harmony in my head to the song. So that's my experience with that. And in driving, I don't know. Like I feel like what you're bringing up, I can resonate more with when thinking about just like, I don't know, just being, how do I put this? Like just being creative in any way, not necessarily like originally creative, but just like, oh, I'm gonna like sing along, or I'm gonna like have this like not a tick, but sort of like a stim, like I'm just like doing this. I'm walking around and singing, or I'm thinking about this like beat, or I'm doing whatever, you know? Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. And you know, I'm curious though, because you talked about the streets in New York, and you know, when I'm walking in an urban area, you know, around people like that, for me that's the exact opposite of creative, because there's just too much going on, and you have to manage where you're going. And I was out hiking this summer in Wyoming, and I mean, you're just surrounded by nothing but open space, and I could like the ideas I got for writing when I was in that open space, I couldn't stop them. I mean, because your brain was able to focus only on that. Like you didn't have to worry about the cars and the people and the sounds. But on the other hand, there are some people that are really that I think really thrive on that kind of, you know, all the noise around them too.
Yeah. Again, like I feel like that, like having all that noise around me and then listening to music as a way to drown it out really is just like my brain coming up with things to think about, like listening to music and then coming up with parts to that song or whatever. It's just a way to kind of just like distract from the noise.
So let me ask all of you this individually, because I'm also fascinated by this. Voice memos. Are your phones just filled with voice memos with ideas? And is there any sense of organization in those phone? And you know, is it just most songwriters tell me they have all these voice memos, but there's no organization. So when they get an idea, they put it in there, and then you've got to go back and find that idea. So Stella, we'll start with you. Is that phone just filled with ideas?
Yes, I have lots of voice memos, and I have lots of voice memos that have like different parts to different songs or different ideas, or like as I'm writing a song, I'll take like, I want to say like 15 voice memos in one sitting of just so I don't forget like this subtle thing, or I don't forget this, I don't know. You know what I'm saying? So it's definitely a lot, and they are very disorganized, and a lot of them are unnamed. But I had this like period maybe like a couple years ago where I was just like, I want to have a really organized voice memos app. So I went through and like listened to each one and renamed them. But that only lasted for not very long. Like now it's still like messy and horrible. But I did try.
So how were they organized? Was it by, you said, yeah, was there any sense of how, was there titles or what?
Yeah, like it'd be titles. Like I would be like, for example, like 0% drum part, or like whatever it is, or like this song, like chorus melody or harmony 4/3 or whatever it is. These are just examples. Not all of those are true, but you know.
That's some organization that I've ever heard. So if there's any consolation, the fact that you tried, that's more than I've ever heard. So, Helena, how about you? Any organization to those at all?
No, it's all just like addresses of places. A lot of like my home address. Probably like I actually want to look at the number. But I look through my voice memos a lot when I'm like on a plane. But I never know like what I would label them. Like it's
nothing else to do.
Sometimes I'll take like what Stella's saying, like I'm writing a song and then I record like something I think is cool, but then it's like, what am I gonna label this? Like idea is the only thing I can think of, and then there's like a million ideas. One time I went through it like 2 months ago, and I just was like labeling the good ones with like positive adjectives. So I was like, nice, good, very nice, awesome.
Let's talk about the ritual of the process, if you have one. I mean, I think whether people often say that they don't have a ritual, then they tell me exactly the ritual of the process. So I've got a few quirks, like I never write and revise in the same chair. If I write in one chair, I have to revise in another one because I need to put distance between the writing and the revision. I am much more of a morning person. I'm not a night person. And there are certain things that I do find that having to have with me make me more productive. So Stella, we'll start with you. Is there any time of day, place, things you have to have with you when you create, or does that not matter?
No, there are things that I have to have. I mean, usually I have to be completely alone in wherever I am. Like, it's hard for me to write if I know that somebody's in the next room. And I have to have an acoustic guitar and my notes app and my voice memos ready to go. And yeah, and it's usually during the day. It's usually not at night. But that's not like a make or break. But yeah, I think the most important thing that aside from just having the instrument and my phone is just being completely by myself.
Okay, now let me get very specific here with the guitar, because there's two camps. Some songwriters have to be sitting, others stand and then walk around. Does that matter?
I definitely have to be sitting because yeah, I don't have a strap on my guitar and I'm not skilled enough to play standing up. So I'm definitely sitting. I would usually like to be on like a couch somewhere comfortable. And I would say that it's interesting what you're saying about like getting up and walking around. I wouldn't say that if somebody just asked me the question like without being prompted, but now that I'm thinking about it, I feel like I'll usually sit down and write like the first part or like I'll get to a place that I feel good about and then I'll take a break. Like I'll get up, go to the bathroom, like get a drink of water or whatever, and maybe like just take a second and then come back to it.
But you have to stop, but you stop when you know you have something good to say later.
Or like I'll stop if I feel like I've come to like a checkpoint, for lack of a better word. Does that make sense? Like I'll write
Yeah.
and I'm like, oh wow, I really like that guitar part. Okay, now that I really like that first guitar part, I'm gonna like take a second. And I feel like I owe myself that. Like I can get up from the chair now.
Well, Hemingway often said that he would always stop writing for the night when he knew he had something left to say, because he was terrified of waking up the next morning with nothing left in the tank.
Mm,
Yeah. So that kind of reminds me of that, what you said. And really quickly with the couch, I had Britt Daniel from Spoon on. This is 5 years ago, and he told me that he always has to be sitting on the floor when he writes, because that's when he started writing songs. He couldn't afford a couch. He can clearly afford a couch now, but he has to still write songs sitting on the floor. And I do hear that. I think we're all like that. Maybe we have those rituals left over from years ago, when we feel like, wanting to go back to those.
mm-hmm. That's cool. That makes sense to me.
So, Helena, how about you? Any rituals in your process?
I definitely agree with Stella about like not being able to write with other people around. I feel like that's more specific to singing for me. Like I can write guitar parts and play guitar. Not if somebody's in the room, probably, but if somebody's like in the room next to me, I can write a guitar part, but I can only sing very quietly if there's anybody that can hear me. If I'm like writing something, because it's just vulnerable and embarrassing.
Yeah.
And I feel like, yeah, sometimes I like to write like vocal melodies walking around outside, like listening to whatever guitar part I just wrote, and then taking a walk. I remember I did that a lot during COVID, and then I would like sing into my voice memos and go back to the house and play the guitar and sing whatever I just thought of.
So that's a part. Yeah, and I listen. I do that too. I mean, I feel like walking whenever the ideas aren't happening. I feel like a good walk is a way to kind of shake things up. Let's talk about other artistic endeavors. Hemingway often said that all writers should go to art galleries to get inspired, but I'd love to talk about reading habits specifically. How much do you get to read? Favorite authors, genres, things like that. Stella, we'll start with you.
God damn it. It's like, it's funny that we're starting with me on this question because I would say I'm the least.
Your name is first on my list, by the way. So that's my
Yes, and that's great. That's great. But for this question, it's just funny because I'm definitely the least I don't want to say I'm the least well read because I've definitely read a lot, and especially when I was in school, would read a lot of academic journals and stuff. But now, on my free time, I'm not a big reader, and I hate to say that. It's embarrassing. It's really embarrassing. But yeah, I wish that I read more. Yeah, I feel like that's kind of all I can contribute to this. But
okay, let's try to dig out of this.
All right.
What would you like to read if you could? Or who did you like to read when you read?
Well, I read a lot of feminism, feminist books and literature and stuff because that's what I was mainly interested in. So bell hooks and all of those kinds of people. But yeah. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Well, said that she had a book that she wanted to lend me, which I'm excited to read.
I'm reading a book right now that reminds me of Stella, so he's about to read it.
I'm gonna read that.
Wait, so Michaela, so what? Okay, we'll go to you next. So yeah, who do you like to read? Are you a genre person or an author person?
I used to read a lot of sci-fi because my dad is a sci-fi writer. But I feel like I've expanded a lot. A few years ago I read a lot of theory, a lot of philosophy books. I was big into Nietzsche and Schopenhauer. And right now I'm really into translated texts from South America. I'm reading a lot of Bolaño and Marquez, and that's my vibe right now. But right now, what reminds me of Stella is this book, A Visit from the Goon Squad.
Oh my God, that's an amazing. Well, yeah. Sorry, I love that book. But go ahead.
Awesome. It's so awesome, and I usually don't read books like that. And I feel like Stella would really love it, so I'm going to give it to her.
But you have to read Candy House. That's her new book. So yeah, it's incredible. So Candy House came out about a year ago, and it is okay. So it was published after Goon Squad, but I think it's a prequel to Goon Squad. I forgot. I think that it is.
I love those characters so much.
Yeah, so it's a lot of the same characters. So you see where they started. So you totally have to read. It's called Candy House. So Elena, how about you?
Yeah, I don't read all that much either, but I feel like I'm always reading a book, but I read really slowly, and I'll take even if I'm really enjoying it, I can take a week away from it if I'm preoccupied with something else. But Michaela definitely was you need to be reading more, bro. It's really fun. And I'm not in school or anything, so I was yeah, I need to be doing something to make myself smarter and more aware. So I started reading, and I'm really enjoying it. Right now I'm reading the Mickey Berenyi book from the woman from Lush. You know that band?
Oh, okay, yeah.
It's their autobiography, and it's really good. It's called How Music Saved Me from Success. So very intriguing title.
I do find, yeah, I mean, I try to read 30 minutes a day, maybe more. And I find that when I don't, it kind of just gets me anxious. I don't write every day, but I read every day.
Yeah.
But awesome. And I tend to read one fiction, one nonfiction at the same time. Takes me twice as long, obviously, but I find that when I do that, the nonfiction book is a break from the fiction book. vice versa. So
I'd also like to add, because what she was saying reminded me of this. I was reading Kristen Hirsch's autobiography. I think it's called like Rat Girl or something. But I was reading that, and then kind of similar to Helena, it's like I just get so preoccupied, and then, I don't know, I'm just like on to the next thing. But I was reading that, and that was cool. And the book that I was really excited about, like the last book I remember being like, oh my God, I'm so excited, and I can't put it down, was kind of embarrassingly the Kurt Cobain. I don't know, it wasn't his diaries, but it was some book. I can't remember what it's called because there are so many, and I was obsessed with that. And it was all I did was read that book. So when it's music related, it's easier.
And that's it for today's episode. Hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget my book, Desolation, a heavy metal memoir by Mark Morton with Ben Opapari, that is me, comes out June 25th on Hachette Books. Mark is a good friend of mine. He is one of the guitarists in the band Lamb of God, and this is his memoir. It's a damn good book, if I do say so myself. But again, that book is out June 25th on Hachette Books. You can pre-order it now everywhere, your favorite online bookstore. So be sure to do that. The site, Songwriters on Podcast, contains all of the archived episodes of the podcast. Of course, you can find them on all streaming platforms as well, but they're also on the site. I only have had the podcast for about, I don't think even 2 years. Before that, all of the interviews were transcribed, and that took a lot of work. And that's why I started the podcast. So if you want to read the interviews that I did before the podcast, they are on Songwriters on Podcast as well. There are about 200 of them going back to 2010. So check those out. If you want to get a hold of me, Ben at songwritersonprocess.com, or fill out a form on the website. I'm here for your questions, your complaints, your concerns, or your interview suggestions. I'd love getting those as well. So hit me up. I will try to respond. So that's it, everyone. Have a great day and see you next time.